Hi everyone, my name is Kathy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the young adult librarian at Library 21C in the Pikes Peak Library District. I'm doing a two-part series on board games by the designer Elizabeth Hargrave. In this video, I'll show you how to play Wingspan. Check out the other video to see how to play Mariposas, which is her newest game. Wingspan came out in 2019 and won over 15 awards, including the Kennerspiel des Jahres, which is one of the big awards in the board game world, as well as a bunch of different categories of the Golden Geek, which is sort of the People's Choice Award for board games. In this game, you are bird enthusiasts trying to attract various sorts of birds to your aviary, and whoever has the greatest number of points at the end of the game is the winner. There are different ways that you can get points. Different birds are worth different amounts of points. You can get points for laying eggs on different cards, for completing the round objective, or completing your own personal goal. You can also use the cards to build engines so that they work off of one another to get you points more easily. Let's get into it. Let's start with game setup. So you can take the lid off of this tray, which contains all the cards. There are a bunch of the bird cards, which have the blue feather back. Then there are the bonus cards that have this green back. And you'll want to separate out these other cards that are for a single player game. You can pop the lid back on the tray. Then take the blue bird cards and shuffle them all together. Then set 3 of these cards face up in the 3 slots on the top of the tray. Then we have egg tokens and food tokens in their little boxes. So you can just pop those open. You can keep these in their containers on the table, or you can dump them if you like. Then we also have the 2 containers of food tokens. Next we have this goal board. It's double-sided depending on how you'd like to play. So the green side is sort of the default side, but there is more direct competition with the other players to achieve these goals, because you get different points depending on how you place, whereas on the other side, the blue side here, you just get 1 point for each time that you do the thing. So there's a little less direct competition for this. This is the side that they recommend if it's your first game. So we'll leave that blue side up for our game. Then we have these goal tiles, which are also double-sided. So you can shuffle them around and then place 1 in each of the 4 spots on the goal board here. 1 for each round of the game. The rest of these goal tiles you won't use in this game, so you can just set them back in the box. Then we have the green bonus cards, so you can just shuffle those together. We have this bird feeder dice tower. So it has 2 bits, the bottom and the top, and they fit together. You can see on the bottom here there's a couple of notches on this end, notch, notch, and on the top bit here there are 2 notches that fit together there. So you can just slide the top into place like that. And then take the 5 dice and put them through the back of the dice tower, and they'll just roll out into the bottom of the tray. Each player gets one of these player mats. And then the action cubes, the color of their choice. Options here are blue, purple, green, yellow, and red. I'll choose blue for me. Then each player gets 2 of the bonus cards, and then 5 of the bird cards off of the top of the deck. And food tokens. Each player starts with 1 of each kind of food token. There are 5 kinds here: berries, an insect, a worm, a little mouse, a bit of grain, and a fish. So each player gets 1 of each of those 5. Then it's time to make some decisions. So out of the cards in hand, the player can keep all 5 of the bird cards if they like, or they can discard some. For each bird card that they keep, they have to discard 1 of the food tokens. So if somebody keeps all 5 of the bird cards they start with, they will start with no food tokens. Looking on the cards here, they all have the symbols in this corner. This is the type of food token needed to play this bird. So that's something to keep in mind when deciding which cards to discard at the start and which food tokens to discard for the cards that are kept. For example, if I want to keep this blue-gray gnatcatcher, I would want to make sure that I keep that little insect token that I have so that I am able to play him. So decide what mixture of bird cards and food tokens to keep, and then also look at your bonus cards. So you'll keep 1 of these, and you'll want to look at the birds that you have in your hand and decide which of those goals might best match up with the birds that you have to start with at least. So keep 1 of those, discard the other. And whichever bird cards, if you decide to discard 3 bird cards, put them in the discard, and then you would have to discard 2 food tokens for the 2 bird cards you are keeping. Then you're set up to go. Decide who the first player will be and give them the first player token. On your turn, you have the choice of 1 of 4 actions. You can either play a bird card from your hand, gain food from the bird feeder, and activate the powers of your forest birds, lay eggs on birds and activate the powers of your grassland birds, or draw bird cards and activate the powers of your wetland birds. And we'll go over how each of those actions works. Let's quickly go over the layout of the bird cards. So we have the grasshopper sparrow here. Obviously we have the name at the top. Then this is the habitat symbol. So on the board there's the 3 rows. There's the forest, the grasslands, and the wetlands. So this bird can only be played to the grasslands. There are some, like this house finch, that can be played to multiple habitats. Next are the food requirements. If there's a slash, it's 1 or the other. So to play this grasshopper sparrow, you have to spend either an insect or a grain. If there's a plus sign, that means you need both. and some of them have this little wild symbol. So to play this one, you need an insect, a mouse, and one of anything. Then the symbols along this side here, the number with the feather is the number of points this card is worth. Next is the type of nest that this bird builds, and there's some goals and things like that that depend on nest type. Then there's the egg limit, so that's how many eggs can be on this card at once. Then over in this corner we have the wingspan. Some powers depend on wingspan. And then we have the colored bar with the bird's power. So these three birds all have a brown bar here. The brown powers all say when activated. So if you're doing an action for your turn that's not playing a bird card, like if you use the top row of your board, the forest, you gain food from the bird feeder, and then any of the forest birds that you have in that row that have a brown power, their power happens at that point. There are also birds with just a white bar here that say when played. So this ability just happens when you play it to your board just the one time. And then there are some birds with a pink bar here that says once between turns. These all state something that happens on another player's turn. So this one says when another player's predator succeeds, gain 1 die from the bird feeder. So you always want to be checking to see if other players are doing things on their turn that allow you to do the pink powers on birds that you have on your own board. Then at the bottom there's just a little map that shows where in the world this bird lives, as well as a little trivia fact about them. Let's look at the first action, playing a bird card from your hand onto your player mat. You'll play the card into the row for the habitat in which it can live. So this grasshopper sparrow can only live in the grasslands. It always goes into the leftmost open space on the board. So if in a future turn I wanted to play this greater roadrunner, it would go into this space here, as that is now the leftmost available space in that habitat. You also place one of your action cubes in the column where you're placing the bird card, up here in this top row where it says play a bird. You have to pay the food cost shown on the card here. So for this grasshopper sparrow, either an insect or some grain. So I can take an insect token from my supply and discard it back to the general supply. There are some abilities in the game that will let you cash food tokens on a bird card. Tokens cached on a bird card cannot be used to pay for another bird card. You can only pay to place bird cards out of your regular food token supply off of the player mat. If you don't have exactly the kind of food that it asks for, so if I didn't have either an insect or a bit of grain, you can use any 2 other tokens as a wild, which it pictures up here in the corner. 2 of anything can act as 1 of anything. So I can use this mouse and this fish in the place of either the grain or the insect. You'll see that in this top row here, there are also some egg icons. This is an additional cost to play a bird into these columns. So you always have to play the food cost. If I want to play this roadrunner here, I would place my action cube on this space. I would have to pay an insect, a mouse, and 1 of anything, and then also 1 egg. We'll see in the future how eggs are placed on bird cards, but to be able to play this card, I would have to be able to take an egg off of another bird card on my board and put that back in the general egg supply. Then after you've played your card, you've paid the food cost, you've paid the egg cost if there is any. There is none for this first column here. Then move the action cube all the way over to the left. If the bird has an ability that says when played, that ability would come into effect at this time. Let's look at the next action down, gaining food from the bird feeder and activating any brown powers for birds in this row in the forest. So first I'll take an action cube and place it on the leftmost empty space in this row. So in this case, right here. Then I gain the amount of dice shown on the space. So here there's 1, 2 in these spaces, and 3 in this space. So I can look at the dice available in the bird feeder dice tray here. Let's say to play a card out of my hand, I would like to have a fish token. I can take this die showing the fish out and place it on the table. And then I'll take from the food token supply the fish token and put it in my food token supply over on the side of my player mat. Some of the spaces, this one that I'm currently on as well as this one, have this card to die conversion symbol here. So this is saying that as well as taking this number of dice out of the bird feeder and gaining the appropriate number of tokens, I can also choose to discard one of the bird cards in my hand to grab another die out. So I could discard a card and then take this mouse if I wanted to. That's optional. And you can only do this once, so I couldn't discard more than one card to exchange it for more food. Then after I've gained the amount of food shown here, made this card to food conversion if I want to, then we'll move the cube over to the next space and do the abilities shown on that card. So since I have a bird with a brown when activated power here, I can go ahead and do this ability. So this one says, when activated, tuck a bird card from your hand behind this bird. If you do, draw one bird card. So I could take a bird card in my hand. If it's one that I don't think that I want to play out on my board here, I can just tuck it underneath this card. And then this ability allows me to draw a new card to my hand as well. Then finally, the cube moves all the way off to the left side of the board there. All of the bird abilities are optional, so if I didn't want to tuck the card from my hand, I don't have to do that. If I have multiple bird cards in this row, say for example, if these were all forest bird cards, which they're not, let's say they are, I would start my turn by placing this here, gaining 2 dice from the bird feeder with the option to discard a card to gain another. And then I would activate this ability if I wanted to. I wouldn't activate this ability since this is a when played ability and that just happens when it's placed on the mat. And then I could activate this ability if I wanted to, and then finally place the cube off to the left-hand side here. If the bird feeder is empty when you're going to gain food, you take all 5 dice and put them back into the back of the bird feeder so that they roll down again. If these are ever all showing the same face, this counts as its own face. For this one, it's an option. You can either get the insect or the grain, not both. If there's ever the same face in here when you go to get food for any reason, you have the option to take all 5 dice and re-roll them. And that includes if there's just 1 die left in there. So if there's only this die left in the bird feeder and I go to gain food and I don't want a berry, I have the option to re-roll all of them. Next, let's look at the lay eggs action in the grasslands row here. So if for my turn I would like to lay eggs on some of my bird cards, I'll take one of my action cubes and place it on the leftmost empty space there, and then I can lay the number of eggs pictured. So I'll take 2 eggs from the supply. The color of the eggs does not matter, and I can lay them on any of the bird cards I have on my mat that have space for them. I can put them all on one bird if I like, or I can spread them out. This bird has an egg limit of 2. This bird has an egg limit of 3. If I have to lay more eggs than I have room for, If, for example, I had 3 eggs on this bird, which is its limit, and I had to place 2 eggs this turn, this grasshopper sparrow has an egg limit of 2. I can place 1 egg there, the other egg is wasted. I have nowhere I can place it. 2 of the spots, similarly to this top row here, have a conversion. So these 2 spots say that you can lay the number of eggs pictured here, and then if you want to, you can discard any one of your food tokens to lay 1 additional egg. Then, after the eggs are laid, we go through the same process that we did in the upper row to activate powers. So I'd move this cube over here. This bird's ability says, when activated, lay 1 egg on any bird. With the setup that I just did here, obviously these 2 birds are already at their egg limits, so there would be no space for me to place an egg. But as before, all powers are optional. So even if there was space and you didn't want to lay an egg for some reason, you could skip it if you like. And then move the cube all the way over to the left. I will also note at this point that there's 4 different types of nests on the cards here. So there's a platform, a bowl, a cavity nest, a ground nest, and the star is a wild nest. So some of the goals and bonus cards will have different effects depending on the nest type of the birds, so you want to keep an eye out for that. Now let's talk about the final action, drawing bird cards and then activating any abilities for the birds in your wetland row. So as with the other actions, I'll take one of my action cubes and place it in the leftmost open space in the row, and then I draw the number of cards pictured. I have an option here. You can either draw from the top of the deck, which is face down, or I can select from the 3 face-up birds in the tray here. Similar to the rows above, there are 2 spaces in this row that let you get a bonus. So here you can take an egg that would be on one of the bird cards on your mat, discard 1 egg to draw 1 extra card. You have no hand limit, so you can have as many cards in your hand as you like. Then, as with the other rows, we'll move the cube over, activating powers as we go. So this bird has this little skull and crossbones predator symbol, and it says when activated, roll all dice not in the bird feeder. If any are fish, gain 1 fish token and cash it on this card. So if there are 3 dice that are not in the bird feeder because they've been used to gain food at some point earlier, I can take those 3 dice, re-roll them. Bad luck there. Let's say if 1 comes up a fish, I can take 1 fish token out of the general supply and put it on that bird there. As in the other rows, all bird abilities are optional. Then finally, move the cube all the way off to the left. With this tray here, if you decide to draw a bird from the face-up birds in the tray, it's not refilled immediately. So say I had 2 birds in this row, so that when I drew cards, I was drawing 2. I can draw 2 that are face up here, but I don't get to draw 1 and then immediately refill this space, see what that card is, and then draw it. These do not fill until the end of your turn. There are 170 different bird cards in this game, which means that there's a bunch of different abilities on the cards. If you ever get confused and you're not quite sure what you're supposed to do with a bird's ability, there is an awesome appendix, and it has a whole section on the different bird powers, so you can look and find it separated out on the different types of powers. So there's food gaining powers, and it talks about different birds that have abilities that have to do with caching food, gain food from the supply, gain food from the bird feeder, egg laying powers, card drawing powers, flocking powers, hunting and fishing powers. So if you're ever confused and you're not exactly sure what it is you're supposed to be doing with a particular bird, you can check in the appendix to get some clarification. So everyone takes 1 action per turn. The round is over when everyone has used up all of their action cubes. So you start with 8 action cubes, and then as you play, obviously, they all move over somewhere on the left side of the board, depending on what actions that you've taken during the round. Then when you get to the end of the round, everyone removes all of the cubes off of their boards. You'll score the end of round goal, which I'll go over a little more thoroughly in a second here, but you'll take one of your action cubes and put it on your score for that goal, and it stays there for the rest of the game. So that means you have 1 fewer action cube each round. First round you have 8 action cubes, second round you have 7, etc. for all 4 rounds. Then you'll take the face-up birds on the tray, discard those, and lay out 3 new birds, and then pass the first player token clockwise. Let's take a quick look at the different kinds of end of round goals. So we laid out 1 goal tile for each round here. So some of them will have you look at the total number of bird cards that you have played to your mat. This type asks you to look at the total number of eggs that you have in a particular habitat row. This has you look at the number of eggs on cards with a particular type of nest. So if I had eggs on this card, they would apply to that goal, but not on this. This one has you look at the number of bird cards with this type of nest that have eggs on them. So it doesn't care how many eggs there are, unlike these two. It just says how many bird cards with this type of nest have at least 1 egg. There are also some that have you look at how many bird cards you have in a particular type of habitat. And this one's the most complicated, I think. Sets of eggs in all 3 types of habitats. So to get a point for this, you would need to have at least 1 bird in all 3 habitats, and at least 1 egg on each of those birds. So if this was my goal for the first round here and I had this set up, I would get 1 point for this because that's 1 set of 1 egg each in each habitat. That would be 1 point. Or if I had this would be 2 points because I have 2 sets of eggs in each habitat type. So this is the side of the goal mat that they had us choose for your first game, the one that has less competition because you just get 1 point for each time that you've done the thing. On the other side here, you still have the same goal tiles, but on this side you're doing places. So if you've done this the most number of times, you get first place. If you've done it the second most number of times, second place, then third place, then last. Obviously, you can have people tying for these, in which place you would not have a second place. And the number of points for these goals varies. So you can see here that you get fewer points for the goals in round 1. It steps up in round 2, then round 3, then round 4. Finally, you've gotten to the end of the game, you've played 4 rounds. How do you know who won? You have the score pad here, space on the top for all the players' names, and then different things you get points for along the side here. First one, birds. You'll look at the birds on your player mat, and each one has a number of points. So this bird is worth 3 points. Add those all together and put those in that first row. Then bonus cards. Everybody starts the game with one bonus card after you've chosen another to discard. Some birds have an ability that lets you draw more bonus cards at some point during the game. And they do a bunch of different things. Like this one has you look on your player mat for birds with colors in their names. If you have 4 to 5 of them, you get 3 points. If you have 6 or more of them, you get 6 points. Birds that eat a particular type of food, birds that build a certain type of nest, birds with wingspans over 65 centimeters, birds with eggs on them, birds worth less than 4 points. There's a bunch of different bonus cards. If you're not exactly sure what a bonus card means, the appendix has 2 pages clarifying all the different kinds of bonus cards. So add together your points from the bonus cards that you have, put those in that next row. Then the end of round goals, that's this goal card here that we worked through earlier. So look at how many points you got in each of the 4 rounds on this board and add those together to put in this row. Then eggs. For every egg that you have on your board, you get 1 point. For every food token you have cached on a bird, you get 1 point. And for every card tucked beneath another card, you get 1 point. So add those all together to find your total. Whoever has the highest score wins. If there's a tie, then whoever has the most unused food at the end is the winner. If it's still a tie, it's just a tie. So that's Wingspan. I think it's really interesting because of all the different ways that the cards can interact to help you build different engines, and you can approach getting points in all these different ways, right? You could say that your goal is just, I'm going to play a lot of birds that are worth a lot of points, or I'm going to play birds that let me place more eggs so that I have just a ton of eggs on my board and get a lot of points that way. There are so many different ways to approach the game, and I think that makes it really interesting and versatile to play again and again, and try approaching it from different angles. Also, P.S., there's a little diagram on the side of the Wingspan box that shows you how everything fits back into the box, which, having thought to fit game pieces into a lot of boxes before, it's so excellent that they have put this here. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in trying the game that you just learned how to play, the Pikes Peak Library District has a few circulating board game collections. The Cheyenne Mountain Library, Library 21C, and the Penrose Library all have circulating board game collections, and this game is available in all 3 locations. You can check out 2 board games at a time for 1 week.